Somro, who is heading the sustainability function at Angro Corporation, for the fireside session on the role of the private sector for the climate initiative. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us. Sir, given your role in Angro on sustainability initiatives like plastics, circular economy, or anything value chain, what is the role of the corporate sector or OICCI has in accelerating these initiatives? Yeah.
Thank you very much. OICCI is Overseas Investors Chamber for Commerce and Industry. It represents all the foreign investment that are present in Pakistan. And OICCI, by virtue of its members, is one of the most progressive chambers and at the forefront of uh, resolving the climate and other environmental issues that we encounter in the course of doing business. So we have a number of great initiatives whereby the member companies have been um, sort of responding to the enormous challenges that we have. And of course, the response and the nature of the project varies from one sector to another. Each supply chain is different, although there are certain similarities also. So there's a whole lot of different initiatives that the companies have taken, and that covers the entire scope 1, 2, and 3, and the entire value chain. And in certain cases, even when it comes to materials, the complete life cycle analysis and end of life comparisons also of the materials. So in that sense, some of the most progressive practices that are taking place in Pakistan, we find the member companies quite actively participating in those.
Okay, thank you. So, when we are looking at the climate action or climate initiatives, there is a continuous, deterioration of climate change on the impacts on the crops, on agriculture. So, how do you see the OICCI role in that? That how sustainability they can act on or they can improve, improvise the farmers' concerns or the agriculture concerns in that?
So the way we see, for example, challenges in the value chains, they're very complex and they involve multiple stakeholders. And the enormity of climate change implications, I think there is a need to sort of go into strategic partnerships. And those partnerships among stakeholders could not be just limited to one sector. So, for example, just can't be private sector. There has to be a very collaborative, symbiotic relationship with, for example, public sector, the farmers as primary producers in agriculture in particular. And so, what we do, the way it appears, for example, I can give you a few examples of how Engro, for example, has done some work in its value chain, which has, a direct impact in terms of reducing the carbon footprint of our food systems. So in some of the work that we have done in the rice value chain, farmers were trained in conservation agriculture practices. And so what we encourage the use of, for example, direct seeding of rice, and that eliminates the step of transplantation, for example, thereby reducing the need for, sort of taking the plants out of nursery and transplanting them in the field, and thereby ensuring the right number of plants in acre or so. So you can, reasons Pakistan has lower yields is because we don't plant enough plants in our land. And so the methodologies were introduced which were easy to handle. So, for example, 1 square meter of plastic pipe, whereby you put it at random places in the farm, and you can count the number of plants in that square meter, and that becomes sort of a representative of your entire agricultural field. Similarly, alternate wetting and drying methodology, which doesn't require, for example, rice to be grown with standing water. Now that has very interesting environmental implications because with standing water, the microbes in the soil end up producing more methane. So if you switch to alternate wetting and drying, where the farm is actually dry and water is available, for example, in the root zone where it should be available, then there is significant reduction in methane from rice fields. And so that's one example. Similarly, in case of dairy, for example, a lot of work can be done in terms of working with the animal feed, whereby additives are available which could actually impact directly the enteric methane that comes from the animals. And so there are a variety of practices which may not necessarily require significant investment, but it requires kind of relooking at the way we do our agriculture, for example, and it would have significant impact from the climate perspective. And so, but for that, I think what is really required is a little bit of a push from stakeholders together. Alignment is extremely important because this kind of work just cannot survive in isolation. And so a combined push. So, for example, currently we are facing, issue of smog in Punjab. One minor contributor in that is crop burning. Uh, so it's something that can easily be covered. We actually did cover it in rice wheat rotation, and so there are implements available which actually use that stubbles that are left after rice harvesting. It cuts it and it uses it as a mulch, thereby even reducing the need for irrigation also because the moisture in the soil is retained because of that. And you could actually plant wheat into it. So it not only has this environmental benefit, but also reduces the transition time between two crops, which is again important because if wheat goes, the plantation of wheat goes a little late, it has direct implications on the yields. And so there are multiple benefits from climate perspective, from cost efficiency perspective, as well as from yield perspective. So these low-hanging fruits, if you may call them, should be our first attempt, and a lot of companies have done these experiments, and we were lucky at Engro. We were very lucky to have partnerships with, for example, GIZ and Department for Aid and Trade from Government of Australia, who kind of co-financed some of these experiments. So this convergence of interests and execution at the farm level, and then recording those, the experiments, sort of doing proper documentation, and then scaling it up is very much doable. It's very much in our control, and it's something that is happening in pockets. And I think it will have significant impact in terms of reducing the carbon footprint of our food systems in particular.
Yeah. So very like great to know and glad to know that absolutely you're doing very well, especially when we're talking about that we are the seventh country in the world who is the most methane producers. So this is the area we have to like work on because methane has global warming potential 84 times the carbon emissions. So we are neglecting that part, and that's great to know that you guys are doing well. So, like you have mentioned that there is a need for the financing, like in specific sectors. When we're talking about the climate finance, so we don't know where we identified the priority areas, like where we need climate financing in that, like especially you are talking about that for this agriculture sector, this need climate financing, improvised it, or these are the sectors that the private sector would come in and invest, and so that we have a fruitful inclusion of the climate action. So does there is any priority sectors you guys have identified, or you have any priority areas to start with?
So I'm not sure if there is any firm final universal list available of this sort, but because, like I said, value chains vary from business to business, and certain value chains are carbon intensive, certain are less, or let's say, and we're sitting in 2024, certain value chains have solutions available, for example, and there's a need to adopt here in Pakistan. But then there are certain parts of the value chains in certain businesses where we are still struggling globally to find the right solution. Decarbonization, unfortunately, is not uniform in terms of its opportunities. So I don't think there could be a universal list. But yes, I mean, in terms of energy, for example, all economic activity requires energy, and I think there's consensus over there. I mean, so the shift on renewables is something that is firmly established. But I think it's very important to, understand the difference between opportunities, climate opportunities, which are viable in the market, and then the ones which are not viable in the market right now. So the ones that are viable in the market, so for example, solar, the price has gone down so significantly over the years. That's no longer necessarily a climate action in the classic sense. It's as even from pure economic analysis, also solar works in so many cases. So that's the in my opinion, that's the ultimate scenario where perhaps which is good for the planet, where the climate-friendly technology is economically viable also. But the real challenge comes in when there is need to put in money, extra money, to achieve decarbonization objectives, and that I think is where in many cases climate finance is the availability is extremely restricted, and so in Pakistan, for example, SMEs would will have difficult time accessing any climate finance. Even large organizations, like I said, I mean, when you have to sort of do experiments which are, for example, taking place for the first time in Pakistan, it's something that a typical financier would be reluctant. I mean, there is the risk associated with that investment. So the regular risk capital would probably not support that intervention, that experimentation. So what we require in Pakistan is, I think, some sort of dedicated climate finance which has greater appetite for risk taking in the climate perspective, so that those essential decarbonization experiments could be done in the field. So for example, the one I talked about, rice alternate wetting and drying in rice, is something that we did from purely from resource conservation perspective, and it's interesting because that activity actually has it touches upon two planetary boundaries, the freshwater use and the climate change. We're talking about so these kind of activities in other value chains need sort of a financial push, the right kind of incentive. If there is development finance available, I think the adoption will increase significantly. We still struggle in terms of attracting carbon markets, financing from the carbon markets, because there's so much of technical process involved, and access to that information, that knowledge, whereby an organization could enter the carbon markets is still difficult to get in Pakistan, and so that's a big barrier. And I think otherwise we could see a lot more projects coming in from Pakistan, because we do have such diverse landscape with multiple opportunities from potentially growing seaweeds in our coastal areas, to mangroves, to decarbonizing agriculture, and and then of course in nature-based solutions with the biomass waste that is available, because we have so much of agriculture taking place. Looking at potential of biochar, which is actually carbon removal methodology that can be adopted in Pakistan. So all these variables actually have great impetus if there is incentive of higher risk-taking capital availability in the market. And so that I think is something which would really help us achieve our decarbonization objectives.
Yeah. Like right now in Pakistan, there are very minimal projects that are working on the voluntary carbon market. So there is a need of like a proper, policy came up from the government, that we are still waiting for that when the carbon policy will come. So everyone has a proper picture that how actually where they are going for the financing, where the project would be registered, and all that
Yeah.
criteria for that. And that's the struggle that every the corporate sector, the private sector is doing. And it's you're in a air, so you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
So considering your role, like you have a corporate role, and you're related with the commerce, so how do you see commerce or chambers could influential the private sector role?
So chambers actually represent private sector. So I think chambers is one very good way of looking at what private sector is thinking, and what kind of preferences that they have both in the economic and climate perspective. And so aggregation or let's say private sector at Chambers is something given. I think the more important role that the opportunity that Chambers offer is to other stakeholders who need to sort of come at the discussion table with private sector in terms of implementing the climate projects. So Chambers is one very good, one-stop shop whereby, so for example, public sector or development finance would actually come in and have interaction with a large variety of economic actors in one go. And then that could actually help, conversations move forward very quickly. And so we do use that as, Chamber as a joint voice, and our participation here also is in that sense representing what private sector thinks. And so Chambers, in my opinion, offer that great opportunity, a one-stop shop for other stakeholders to interact with private sector.
So, as you mentioned, that there's a collective role of chambers. There's a one stop where you can even engage or meet everyone. So, do you think that for the climate action, specifically for the Pakistan, when the COP is on the corner, and we are heading just few days left, so there is do we have a specific stance for the corporate sector, like we are going to the COP, that what they wanted to pitch, like we are starting with a stance from the corporate sector, and then we believe that it would actually implement or act added in our NDCs. So what's your stance, what's your collective stance would be, or you're planning to be?
So the members actually are very keen on taking climate actions, and there's a long list of projects and different industries that are taking place. So we are at a very open climate action in that sense. A large number of organizations have committed to net zero also at different with different timelines, and so all of this activity is taking place. And uh, the idea that all of this could be put together where it is accounted for and there is recognition given to private sector, I think would work great for all of us to sort of maintain our momentum. And also, like I said, that the need for continuous experimentation in our value chains, in our supply chains, is something that where some kind of blended finance, if it can come in. I think the private sector's ability to move quickly forward on decarbonization agenda would increase significantly. And of course, with public sector support is always required. Um, I think if we manage to sort of make process of accessing the carbon markets um, easy, if we manage to make it easier, I think a lot more again can come in from private sector in terms of projects where Pakistan is gifted with such huge land mass also, and there's such a good potential for nature-based solutions, and along with uh, renewable energy opportunities. I think all of this put together, the opportunity landscape in Pakistan is not bad, and it's a matter of putting the other sort of necessary conditions in place that I think private sector can really become a leading partner in achieving our NDCs as well as the organization of our overall economic activity.
So, any specific thing like your research areas on circular economy of plastics, you wanted to highlight on that, like role of
So
us?
yeah, so I'll just mention a lot of things are happening on circular plastics in Pakistan. So we'll get to hear from Pepsi and Coke and Nestle also on that. So we can see at their stores also a lot of work that has been done. Uh, so what we have done at Engro, because we are also plastic manufacturers, we have a PVC business. We have set up a circular plastic institute at one of the business schools in Karachi, Karachi School for Business and Leadership, KSBL. So what the center does is basically it gets into grounds up research. So a lot of research has been done in the way waste is managed in Pakistan. We have so much waste collection taking place, which is entirely in the undocumented part of the economy. So the first-hand credible information is a major problem. We also supported bringing in the global plastics action plan, which is World Economic Forum's overall global action. Pakistan is among the first, I think, if I'm not mistaken, among first 5 or 8 countries where a national plastic action plan exists, and so there's a platform available whereby all concerned stakeholders could get together and carry out the required actions. So again, like I said, the collaborative element in terms of our response to these environmental challenges is something which we believe in, and it's the research by Circular Plastic Institute is available for the entire industry. We're looking forward to our collaborations with other relevant stakeholders. Um, so yeah, I mean, this is something that we believe is of great value and will be essential part of solutions that we will have in future.
So, like listening to you is very insightful, and you know that there is a lot of work the corporate sector is doing in Pakistan. So, one thing which stuck in mind that there is a need for regulatory push, the policy from the government. So, what sort of your stance on that? What things you prioritize that you need this policy aligned or this policy inconsistency for the beneficiary of corporate sector?
So I think the path to decarbonization would start with appropriate disclosures, and so the incentives in terms of companies actually looking at their value chains and be able to report on not just the climate change, which is like our carbon footprint only, but also in terms of our other environmental impacts like impact on biodiversity or land use change or freshwater use. I think some incentives towards encouraging companies to start into the information years, because that's the starting point. The data will always be the starting point.
Yeah.
And then I think once we have that kind of information available, which in case of climate change, is
Very
fairly a large number of data sets are available. But in terms of other planetary boundaries, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We were talking about COP 29 in Baku, but the COP 16 that just concluded in Colombia was in a certain ways was disappointing because there wasn't a conclusion on the financing mechanism, for example. So it's going to take a little more while we are going through the biosphere integrity in terms of biodiversity is really in difficult times. We are losing species at a rate that we've classified as being in mass extinction. So climate change has rightfully, but I think has taken up the entire space of conversation on let's say planetary health. But there are other planetary boundaries also that need to be focused, and a lot of work needs to be done there. So those conversations I think need to get more complex so that we are able to the idea really is to keep the planet healthy. And so, while climate change is one very important aspect of it, but just one of the planetary boundaries. The other 5 planetary boundaries that we have already crossed, and another one that we are about to cross, ocean acidification, these all will have serious implications on planetary health. So we need to bring those in conversation also, and we need all the tools, methods, and the right kind of incentives so that the data is captured and then right kind of solutions come out and those are experimented with and then implemented in an informed way so that overall planetary health is something that we're able to maintain. So I think road ahead is has many challenges and lots of opportunities also. It's really a challenge for us, all of us together, to sort of put our heads together and find these mutually reinforcing solutions. Um, Private sector and the chambers, I think OICC and particular, for example, are very keen on moving forward on these solutions and aspects.
Yeah, thank you so much. And of course, when we are heading towards the COP and our major negotiations part are on NDCs and also on the climate finance. And if the still the data is lacking, like especially when we are talking about the GHG inventory, so it's lacking, so we are not able to make the perfect NDCs accordingly on scope 2 and 3 emissions. So yeah, thank you so much. And I believe that YCSCI would do many more things, many good things in the future with robustness. And thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.